Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Today we have Josh from the band Hurricane Joe. Josh, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, man. So, why don't you tell our audience here a little bit more about how you got into music, kind of like what inspires you and like what you're currently up to now?
Okay. A lot of it had to do with my dad was always really into music, and like I just eventually went from really soft stuff when growing up, and just like kept getting into where I'm at now, like just like slam death metal, all that nonsense is what I really like, but it's not what we do.
Yeah. Is there like any song or album that you heard when you were younger that really inspired you to become a musician, that you listened to it and you're like, oh, holy crap, I need to listen to this or and do this?
Oh, absolutely. Like the entire Black Dahlia Murder Nocturnal album is I listen to that still like on a daily basis. Like that is my favorite thing to exist.
Yeah. What about that really inspired? Is there like anything in particular that really got your attention when you first listened to it?
Well, I mean, it was one of the first like kind of more harder metal like albums I've ever listened to. Mm-hmm. And it's just like the way that the vocalist does what he does. Just like I need to be able to do that. That was like my goal from the minute I heard them. Like,
yeah. So, did you always have an idea of the type of genre that you wanted to do? Did you always kind of like, because you did like some experimental stuff, or you're currently doing some experimental stuff, did you always kind of like want to change genres, or did you always have like a set genre in mind that you wanted to play?
It's never really been set. I've done a lot of projects in the past when growing up and whatever, but this is probably like the most fun because I can basically just do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. So is there like any genre that you focus on more specifically than others, or do you just kind of like to mix it up a lot?
Personally, I like to, like, for writing, we just do whatever, honestly, but like listening is like mainly death metal and like slam and deathcore, that area.
So do you take a lot of the deathcore in your lyrically wise, or do you like to, so like you kind of said that you like to balance it out a little bit, but do you take a little bit of deathcore into your lyrics or death metal?
In a couple of songs, yeah. Just the goofy fantasy aspect of death metal, I kind of just make shit up, There's nothing else to think about.
Yeah. So where do you mainly get your lyrics from? Is it more of like day-to-day stuff, or is it kind of like stuff that you might hear in the news, or is it kind of like a combination of both?
It's never like political or anything. It's just kind of what we have out is a lot of personal stuff, and everything else has just been just made up stories that I thought were fun.
That's not, hey, those are the best type of stories. Are usually the made up ones. So how did you come up with the name Hurricane Joe? Is there any significance, or was it just something that just randomly popped into your head? How'd that turn out?
I wasn't around for the naming process exactly.
So, do you remember what your first ever show was? Not even like when you were in Hurricane Joe, but like even just like your first ever show live. Do you remember what that was and kind of like what happened and what you kind of were feeling?
Oh man, I think I was like 14.
Oh wow!
And I was playing this kind of like I don't know, like kind of punky, kind of metal band. I don't know how to say what it was, but yeah, I was super nervous. I'm still always like really nervous, but like at the end of it, it felt awesome because everyone's like really supportive of it, even though it wasn't great. But yeah. They were. I really enjoyed being on stage, and it was fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So is there like any like tradition or like routine that you guys have in the band before you like get on stage? Is there like any ritual? Do you guys like do certain things, or is it just kind of you guys kind of like to wing it?
A lot of the time it's everyone does their own thing. Mm-hmm. I usually just like do a bunch of weird breath stuff and get a little intoxicated because anxiety, whatever, being a frontman and having anxiety isn't great.
Yeah, I was gonna say that because we've had a few frontmen on here, but not as much as I would really like. But being a frontman, how much more extra kind of pressure do you think that you sometimes put on yourself as opposed to maybe someone like the bass player or even like the drummer? Because you're the one that really a lot of people are focusing on, and you're the one that has to deliver the lyrics. How much added pressure do you think that kind of just puts on you?
I'm not really sure. It's always just been there because I've never had to do anything else. Mm-hmm. It's just a normal amount of pressure, I suppose. I think like everyone feels the same.
Yeah.
Comes to us because we all, there's a lot of parts in the song that stand out. So everyone's kind of just like not always focusing on the front man. So it's all good.
Have you tried to play any instruments, or have you just said, no, I just want to be a front man. I just want to be a vocalist and that's it?
Well, I mean, as a kid, I can play saxophone still, but that's about it.
Hey, we had a saxophone guy on yesterday too. Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean,
Hell yeah.
that's a hard thing to play. People don't give it enough credit. So.
Dude, it's fun. I love it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, did you have like a career that? Did you play it in like school, or is that how you got into it?
Oh no, I kind of just picked it up in probably like sixth grade or so,
Oh.
and then it just kept playing. Like it's just fun to fuck around on, you know. It's like
Yeah. So, why don't you just explain a little bit how you got into the band Hurricane Joe? Because, like you said before, you weren't in it during the naming process. So, how did you come to be? Did you get invited, or was there like an audition? What was the process like?
well, all of our members, like including the drummer, whose last show with us is on the 27th this month, but we've all known each other since we were like 16 or 17 years old. Some of us longer.
Yeah.
But I met them in high school, and we had a different band when we had two vocalists. One was myself, and the other was our friend John. But we disbanded after high school, and everyone kind of bounced around the country for a while, and then we all met back up probably like 3 years ago.
Oh wow.
2 or 3 years ago, and like we're just like, screw it, let's start making music again.
Yeah.
And it was just our drummer and our guitar player Simon, and then they announced it, and then I think it was like a week or two later, I was like, you guys still wanna?
Yeah.
You guys need a vocalist? And they're like, sure.
That's awesome. So, what would you say? Because I've asked this about people that are in other positions in the band. What would you say is the biggest misconception about being a vocalist? Because I've already talked to bass players, I've talked to drummers, and then they have their own thing. What specifically do you think is a misconception that people have about just the vocalist in a band?
Shit. I don't really know. I mean, when I see vocalists, I usually think their egos are really high, which I've met plenty now. Is like, that's not true at all. Like,
I was gonna say one of them that I generally tend to think is that I'm like, oh, they just sing, so they just have to sing or whatever. So it's not like their job is really as tough as maybe like a drummer who has to have unbelievable stamina, or a bass player or a guitar player. But then once you really like get down to it, I mean, some of the vocals that they have to sing, it's just as tiring as any other position in the band. And as an outsider's point of view, it does look like they have a little bit more pressure added on to them, just being the one that really has to be the center stage for a lot of the time. And then a lot of times they're like the center focus of the band, so that's a lot of added pressure. So would you think that would be kind of something that people would normally tend to think when they first see you, is kind of like, oh, well, he doesn't play any instruments, so his job's a little bit easier?
Maybe. I mean, I know myself and other vocalists too, we all help bring our stuff off, so I don't really see that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, no problem. So yeah, do you vocalists tend to kind of like have your own niche when it comes to like a group? Do you vocalists like to stick together, or is it kind of one of those things where you guys just kind of like to be on your own?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because I was just talking to a drum guy, and then he's like, yeah, most of the drummers for the bands like kind of like to hang out a little bit, because the drummers have a little bit more different like personality sometimes than a lot of other people in the band, and the bass players kind of have their own little scene. So yeah, but with vocalists, you think it's a lot more just they like to spread out a little, and they like to be with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, like I was at the Faceless a couple of days ago, and I just like recognized a bunch of friends and people we've played with, and I was just like trying to talk to everyone.
Yeah.
But
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was hanging out with Matt from Nomad for most of the show, and he's their drummer. So
yeah. So you're also currently playing in the Minneapolis area, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how would you describe the Minneapolis scene? Because to be honest, before I started doing this podcast, I had no idea about what the music scene really was like in Minneapolis. I'm from Bloomington, so I should know, but I was surprised to know that the abundance of metal that there is in Minneapolis. Like, it's a huge metal city. I had no idea. And then all of a sudden I got like, because I started pulling all these things, and I was like, oh, I should do a podcast. I'll have people on. All of these metal bands started coming to me, and like no one else, and I was like, oh my God, there's a lot of metal bands. So I've had a lot of metal bands on, but is there anything besides really metal that you think that most people wouldn't think of when they think about Minneapolis, that as scene-wise?
As a kid, it was really apparent, but I don't know where that's going because I don't follow it. But there's a lot of hip hop stuff up here that I really enjoy.
Yeah. Where do
Otherwise, like I don't see.
Oh
that. Yeah. No, I'm good. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I was gonna say, where do you think the metal, just the huge metal culture came from? Because when you think about Minneapolis or you think about Minnesota, you usually think about like the Bob Dylans or the Princes, and those aren't really the most metal guys in town. So where do you think that whole kind of scene started from?
I'm not entirely sure. I'd like to think it kind of stemmed from like After the Barrel when they got their wins going.
Yeah.
Because like even in the last couple of years, we moved down here probably about 2 years ago now,
Mm-hmm.
and like I'm still finding out about all these other bands that have been around for years that I've never heard of in my life. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
there's more metal here than there's anywhere else.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was surprised, but then I think of maybe bands like Husker Du or Husker Du kind of really they kind of took off from kind of here, and they might have been like one of the big influences. But yeah, the metal scene. I mean, I would have never thought in being and growing up myself. I mean, I was inspired. I've said this 100 times on the podcast, so I'm just gonna say it. Metallica, Master of Puppets was my big thing that really got me into kind of like metalish music, where I was like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. So I saw also before this podcast, I went on your Facebook page a little bit, and you had put down like the 10 albums that really inspired you. Do you remember kind of like what you posted? And would you mind like maybe like going through a little bit and just explaining why they inspired you and just kind of like how you got into those albums?
I think I'm only on like the fifth day right now, but
Yeah.
a few of them, actually two of them, I bought on the same day.
Oh.
I bought the Black Dahlia's Nocturnal, Suicide Silence, The Cleansing, and then a couple other ones. I think it was 3 Inches of Blood, and they're awesome and they're hilarious. But I bought all of those three, and there's some Evergreen Terrace, which I wasn't a huge fan of personally, but whatever. Bought all those four on the same exact day, and I don't know, it was just all on a whim. I never heard of any of them before, so it was just kind of like, screw it, I'll take these. There's a really small metal section in this record store I went to,
Yeah.
and like fell in love with all of them. That's kind of how those came out.
That's great. So we were kind of talking a little bit, or we were elaborating it on a podcast that I did a few days ago on kind of how you kind of, a lot of people say that like kind of like rock music, metal included, is not as mainstream as it used to be. It's kind of a little bit dead. What do you think specifically yourself would be the reasons why you think rock music kind of faded and off in the sideways, and we have kind of more of a rap culture kind of like mainstream? What do you think are the main causes to that?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. There could be something about rap music being more seemingly lucrative than rock would be now, because I don't know, they're always talking about money and whatever. Like,
It's true.
the mainstream, as it were.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We were kind of talking about it, and maybe it was also something to do with how rock music hasn't really been as much innovative as kind of hip hop has, where hip hop is kind of like evolving a lot, whereas rock music is kind of stayed to the same formula that they kind of had in maybe like the 80s or 90s. They haven't really updated. So hopefully, I mean, they can do that more, because I was not blessed to be born in the age of like hair metal bands and all that stuff. I wasn't blessed to be graced in that period, because I would have enjoyed it so much. But yeah, I happen to be born just right at the end of rock music, basically. So I'm hoping that it makes a comeback and becomes more mainstream. But you were also talking about with Hurricane Joe, you guys had some trouble setting up tours, and then something unfortunate happened. And I think the listeners would be very grateful to hear this, because we've talked about tours a lot on this podcast, and how a lot of people have the misconception that it's just one huge party and everyone just goes and gets drunk all the time and you're just going to have all these memories. But then people don't realize a lot of bands, until you get like that level of fame that's sustainable, you lose a lot of money on the tour, because you're spending all the money like going to gigs, buying cars, spending money on gas. Could you kind of explain your personal experiences you had the tour and that incident you had? Because then I think it would be very informative to the audience that would then be able to say, oh, well, you got to be a lot more cautious before you go on tour.
Yeah. Well, we haven't genuinely been on tour yet.
Mm-hmm.
But we've just set a few up, and like they fell apart, which is, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one in particular we got offered. I'm not going to use names or anything.
Oh, no,
like,
yeah, no problem. Yeah.
This guy. But I guess it was back in this early winter. We got offered to go to out of the country with a couple other locals, and like apparently a big name or whatever.
Oh.
So we were all into it. But if you're familiar with buy-in tours for the opening.
Could you explain a little bit what that means to the audience?
Okay, yeah. So if you're buying in, say you're the opening of the tour, kind of. You're just going to be playing first, and you have to pay the tour to play on it, basically.
Oh.
Like, if I'm correct, the Graveslave, the guys from up here, they had a buy-on for the Origin tour in Europe. But yeah, that's what that was. But apparently, we were informed that there was only going to be us and another local band that they chose from somewhere else to go out of the country, and yeah, so we had to pay him thousands of dollars.
Wow.
I wouldn't say how much.
Oh no, yeah, no problem.
Because like it was said that we would be reimbursed, which is usually kind of what happens, which is fine. Like if we have to pay it and we'll get it back, that's perfectly acceptable. I'm super down for that. Turns out he talked to probably about 6 other locals from other areas around the country, and then wrote up contracts, had to sign the contracts, and then we ended up paying him his money. And then turns out the whole thing was just fake.
Wow.
So like he just jacked a bunch of money from a bunch of guys, like, and like we were trying to get everyone that was involved was trying to get, somehow get him back. We all did what we could, but it's not enough money for us to like actually take the man to court for it. So he knows he knows what he's doing as a scam artist. So
yeah, that's
we never officially said anything about it, but
that's just so, I mean, because bands, I mean, you guys are still like about to take off. You guys are still like coming up and coming. I mean, and just to do that to those type of bands, I mean, that's just even worse than if they were to do it to like a U2 or anything like that, the bands that like could afford that. But I mean, to scam off the guys that are still up and coming, I mean, that's just ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, because I think
my buddy Joe actually said it the best way you could is like he's basically just like taking these people's hopes and dreams and just like shitting on them.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's horrible. So did you have you had any experience with other guys like that? Because we've talked a lot about the music industry, and we mainly talked about the goods. We've been talking a lot about how it makes people feel and how it can be such a high for the musicians when they perform. But we haven't really also discussed the bads, and there are a lot of bad people out there that are kind of like out there just to make money. And then you always hear about like the greedy corporate, like the movie villains are like always like the greedy corporate snobs that like come and try to take the band for all they're worth, and they get them to sign these contracts where they give them up like 90% of their money or whatever. Have you personally, other than that, run into other guys that were maybe like offering to like give you guys an album or whatever, but then as soon as you came to look into it more, you're like, oh, this guy isn't really what's best for us?
We had a slightly similar situation with being someone trying to like ask us to sign on their small label, but we did. This was all after we got screwed, so we were a lot more cautious and just like, no, absolutely not, because it looked bad.
What not to like get into it a little bit more, but like what in particular, like you don't have to mention the guy or the label, but just for bands that are like up and coming, so they can also like kind of get a good idea. What really in particular was giving off like a bad vibe before you signed with like this type of label?
They weren't just like, if we're gonna sign, like for us, it wants to be specifically just for like a music label, but they were offering like plenty of other options, which I think that would mean they wouldn't be focusing on just music, which is what we're looking for. So definitely read into that if you get to that area, because there's a lot of contracts that involve like TV deals and other appearances. Like, I don't know, I think there was like a modeling thing in there too, which was ridiculous.
Wow.
But
yeah, I mean, as long as you're able to do some good Vogue work, I mean, I guess, who knows, you maybe might become a male model then after that.
that'd be great.
Yeah, the first
fuzziest male model ever.
Yeah, the first heavy metal male model, man. That's a way to get your brand out, man. So, let's get a little bit more into like your performing. So, obviously one of the big parts of this podcast and a lot of thing that I get a lot of positive feedback on is kind of like hearing musicians talk about how just the great vibe and the great high that you kind of get like performing live. Could you describe that a little bit? Like, what does that feel like? Because if you really think about it, musicians make up a small percentage of society, and not that many people, I mean, you might have to add on like stand-up comedians, but not that many people get to experience that performing live, and a lot of people are just scared to hell, to be honest, to go up and to perform in a lot of people. But to the people that are willing to do that, what is that feeling like for you when you're able to perform and you just get that feeling, that rush of performing?
Man, it depends a little, honestly, because like personally I feed off a lot of crowd stuff. So if the crowd isn't like having their fun, like they're just kind of like standing there like arms crossed, all judgy, then it's just like I'm not having fun. But like if they're into it and they like dig it and they're just headbanging once in a while, it's just like, you guys are my friends. You guys are like mentally giving me hundreds of hugs right now, and I love you for it. That's kind of it.
So, do you think that there's added pressure kind of because you write some of the lyrics to the songs? And I mean, I've always talked to people who like write the lyrics to their songs and they kind of consider their songs kind of like their babies because like they're the ones that came up with them. They're the ones that kind of introduced them, and it's kind of like their thoughts coming out into speech that's being presented to a great vast variety of people in the audience. Do you kind of feel an extra thrill knowing that like it's your song that they're listening to or part of your lyrics?
A little, yeah. Like with the more personal songs that we have on the Alpacalypse, like for sure. Because there's one in particular that I like a lot, and it means a lot to me actually. And once I saw someone, a friend of mine, just like friend of a friend of mine, was just like doing the words with me. I was like, yes, thank you. You're a beautiful person.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you ever gone crowd surfing when you were in concert?
No, that terrifies the hell out of me.
I know, because I always think of the opening scene of School of Rock when Jack Black tries that, and then he just absolutely eats shit and just like hits a guy and then just falls. I've always said like, and I'm guilty. I'll admit one of my guilty pleasures. I sometimes look up those type of videos just to watch like people try to do like crowd surfing and then just like eat shit, and that's. I mean, for me, that's at least entertaining, but not for the person. But have you ever had like any mosh pits or any fights break out at any of your concerts?
We definitely had a few pits before. Where we used to live, we were from Duluth.
Oh yeah.
Most of us grew up there, but for some reason the Duluth kids still like us.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pits up there all the time. No one ever really got into a fight. Yeah. This one guy who I think was like tripping or something, but he like poured a bunch of wine on his head and broke a glass. Like, I don't know.
Wow.
That's the closest. Yeah, it was goofy.
What's a dude drinking wine at a concert? First of all.
Right. I know. It's like what our venue. It's our go-to venue every time we're there. But it's just like a coffee shop, and they serve wine and beer.
What's the name of your go-to venue? Because I did have a guy on from Duluth, and I know I have a few fans up in Duluth. So if they wanted to ever catch you guys up there.
This actually our last show with Devin, our drummer, is going to be at it's Beaner Central.
Beaner Central
Coffee House.
All right, everyone, Beaner Central, and then we'll get the dates later on at the podcast or towards the end of the podcast. But especially talking a little bit more about Duluth, because I did, like I said before, I did have a guy on here earlier. He was, I think, second episode. He was from Duluth, and people don't realize. I mean, Duluth is. It's just, I mean, it's a lot of it's just that city, but it's a huge city. But people don't realize with a lot of that people, I mean, it's over 100,000. There is a scene up there musically. Like people think about the scenes in Minnesota, they usually think about Minneapolis, St. Paul, maybe some bits of the suburbs, but they don't think about Duluth. But Duluth is, I mean, they got quite a scene. Could you maybe elaborate more on the scene up there in Duluth?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I still love all those guys up there. It's just like it was a better fit for us to move down here.
Yeah.
It's the only reason we came. But no, yeah, it's overlooked a lot. We have a couple of friends we used to play with all the time. We still play with these guys. Torment is from Duluth. It's like beatdown band. I love those guys. They're awesome. But like, yeah, it's a smaller metal scene, but as far as like punk and there's a lot of hip hop and DJs and stuff, there's plenty of that. It's like, I don't know, I think almost every bar has a venue up there, so you can play wherever you want.
Did you ever play at Grandma's?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, they don't do metal that much anymore.
I was gonna say, because like out of all the places, I mean, I had a lot of friends that went up to UMD, and I went to Mankato, but going up to UMD all the time is always, yeah, let's go to Grandma's. Everyone goes to Grandma's. So then I was like, oh yeah, well, yep, the whole Grandma's gig. I got through that, but now we're gonna get to more of the podcast. We're gonna get to more of like an inside the actor studio, if you've ever seen that, where I ask you some questions, and it's just kind of like what you would prefer. And so the first question will be, out of all the songs in the history of music, I know this might be kind of like one of those big thought things that you might have to think of, but out of all the songs that are ever written in the history of music, what was one that you would wish that you would come up with personally?
Oh, dude. In the history of everything.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not even that far back. It's probably a couple years, but there's a band Ingested from the UK. I'm sure plenty of people know them, but it's Amongst Vermin is the song. Like lyrically, that's just like perfect for me. I don't know why. He's just so mad.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I have been waiting, because like a lot of people, when they talk about that, they'll say like an old song, like I got a Bohemian Rhapsody yesterday, but yeah, I like it when people say more of the newer stuff, because it proves that, I mean, people are listening to the newer type of heavy metal or rock music, and it proves that, I mean, it still can become mainstream, which I enjoy. But like, I'm still waiting for the one day when someone just goes like, yeah, I'll go with a Mozart or a Beethoven song for whatever. I'm still waiting for that day, and then that day I will be like, okay, I'm officially done with podcasting. This guy's the best. This guy's out of this world. I mean, come on, dude. But yeah. So the second question is, out of all the musicians ever, dead or alive, it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be like, oh my god, dead or alive, but just either way, that you could play one concert with. Who would it be and why?
Oh no. That one's a little harder for me. I mean, it's going to sound pretty typical as well, but one of my favorite vocalists and the old vocalist of Suicide Silence ended up dying a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to play one with him because he inspired a lot of the way I do vocals and whatnot.
That's awesome.
That would be
awesome.
probably pretty sweet.
Yeah. So, but what about him in particular? Do you really think really set him apart for you?
It was one of those. It was one of my first metal bands for one, and then like he, I don't know. It's always like his highs were they were so cool and strange, and he had just like this presence about him. He's this little emo guy, like growing up. It's like, oh wow, that voice can come from someone that little. Say, I got a chance. Like,
oh yeah, I think the same thing about Prince. People don't realize Prince was like 5'2", and then to be able to belt that stuff out, I'm like, come on, dude. But yeah, absolutely. So. Third question will be, out of all the venues on the planet, what is one venue that you, if you could get the choice, you would play at?
On the planet?
Yeah, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anywhere in the world.
What's it called? I can't remember what it's called. Okay, I'm gonna explain it. I won't remember the venue name, but there's a pizza place in Texas.
Oh.
It's like someone's death metal pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like the idea, and they have shows there, and they have like ridiculous pizzas, and it's like the idea of that makes me so happy. I'd play there forever. I don't even care.
Would you just ask for like pizza after the show instead of cash? Just load me up on pizza.
Yeah. They have one that's like straight up the size of a table.
Yeah.
And I would just be like, just pay me in that pizza.
Yeah, I personally, I don't have any musical talent at all, but if I ever had some, I'd like to play, if you know where Slane Castle is in Ireland, it's where a lot of musicians
dude, yeah.
Yeah, just because it's just a countryside and you're like playing like inside the castle, that would be my thing, just because, and the acoustics there are unbelievable. Like I've watched a lot of concerts that are there, so yeah, that would definitely be mine. And so you do experimental stuff, and then my fourth, I got two final questions left for the Inside the Actors studio-esque topic of our podcast. But since you do experimental stuff, what would you say is a guilty pleasure song that most people wouldn't think of you listening to when they meet you?
I'm pretty open with what I listen to, but I have a weird little thing for Panic at the Disco.
Oh yeah.
So like, I forget what song I don't remember what it's called. I think it's just like a newer one too. It's like Death of a Bachelor or something. Yeah. I really dig what he did with that band. So
yeah, I had one guy on a few podcasts ago who was like a heavy dude, and he just looked like he just listened to heavy metal. But then he goes, "Yeah, Backstreet Boys. That's my thing. That's my guilty pleasure." And I was like, dude, come on. But yeah. So and I was like, dude, that's awesome. But is there any for the final question, is there any like genre of music that people wouldn't think of that like you tend to enjoy?
Lately it's just like there's a weird like section of like acoustic pop stuff that my friend always used to listen to, and I don't know, she's been sending me more and more of that, and I actually kind of dig it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know why.
yeah, acoustic songs can be like a lot better because I mean, I was a big Nirvana fan growing up, and then when they did their acoustic show on MTV, that was awesome. Yeah. It really. So I like the songs that guys can write where they can be both a power ballad and then they can just play it on a soft guitar and then it just sounds just as good or just has more meaning to it. I enjoy the crap out of that. So experimental. We didn't really touch too much on. I mean, you play, you write, you do experimental stuff. So what are all the genres that you can at least think of that you've played?
That we've played, I can't really say. Because there's a bunch of songs that we have like in the bank right now we're working on, so
so
can't speak for those ones.
Yeah, so do you have like if you like describe like a concert. Would you have like different genres in that concert? You just like switch it up in between songs, or does it just all like all the songs that you play for one venue, or just like a certain genre, or do you switch it up?
Oh no, no, it's all metal. It's just got some weird aspects to it.
Yeah.
Like no, everyone I've talked to is gonna sound pretentious as shit, but a lot of people I talk to are just like not sure what what subgenre of metal to call us, I suppose. That's why we just go with like experimental, because this one kid called us deathcore the other day. And I was like, we have like no aspects of deathcore in like half the songs, and then
Yeah.
otherwise we do. It's I just couldn't tell you.
I was gonna
It's like,
say my third band on here was deathcore. It was a deathcore metal group, and I was like, yeah, that's a very distinctive sound. So if you're gonna accuse someone of being deathcore, that's one of those things where like that's like calling like someone a pop artist when they're right. I mean, it's just when they have like 100 number one hit songs. It's one of those things where it's so identifiable when you're listening to the song or when you're listening to their music that you're just like, yeah, okay, they're deathcore. But so yeah, what would you say is the point of which you would be able to like say like, oh my god, we've made it as musicians, like we're like really like up and coming? What would you say is the point when you could like turn to your bandmate and say like, holy crap, we've made it?
Honestly, it's just been waiting for just to travel like anywhere still. Well, I mean, we've been to Wisconsin and whatever, but like just to be able to like go hit up somewhere just in a ridiculous area of the States, and that's all we really want to do.
Is there any area in particular that you think that you'd like to go and visit?
I personally just really like the East Coast because like my mom's side is from Pennsylvania, and like the scene over there is just like tough guy nonsense, and I love it.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say they just have the view of the mines, and they're just tough steel workers, basically. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean if you're gonna play deathcore, first of all, that's the place that you're gonna go. You're gonna go to a mean place like Pennsylvania or whatever. But yeah. So when you're thinking about being like on tour or whatever, what goes into deciding like where you guys want to play? Is it more of like you just call up places and then decide like what places want you, and then you kind of like write a map on that for your upcoming tours that you guys are planning, or is it more of you kind of wait for them to get to you? How does that work?
When Max and I were kind of both. Another guitar player of ours, we're kind of both booking for a tour for a while, and it just didn't happen because like no one was available in like half the spots. But it was mostly we just did our research on the venue and saw what past shows they did, and if they were mostly metal, we'd understand that mostly metal people would come to that, or like when their last metal show was, etc. But there's a couple places we had to just like call around to try to set something up, which didn't work out too well.
Yeah, well, it's always a work in progress, especially starting out. And hey, if you guys make it big, or when you guys make it big, you'll have a great story to tell about, just struggling, starting out. I mean, people love to hear those band stories about even if you hear about like the Foo Fighters or Green Day, just the struggles that they had and how they were able to overcome them. And how much, kind of going off that, how much do you think is kind of that entails being a musician, is like knowing that there's going to be tough times starting out, and just to keep that perseverance? How big of a part does the perseverance play to you in order to make it as a musician?
All of it. Like there's been plenty of times that we just want to not do it, but that's all it is. Like we know we can do something with it at least, so we just have to keep going. Like however long it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how long have you been in this band? How long has Hurricane Joe had you as their singer?
There's a little weird thing about that. We joined, I don't know, I want to say, Jesus, almost 4 years ago or so, when we were just first starting out again. And then there was a misunderstanding about halfway through our time together in Duluth, and I quit for a while. And it was kind of iffy. I won't get into it, but and then I've rejoined right before we moved down here, so I've been around for about 2.5 years total.
Yeah, that's a while. I mean, but what would you say is, especially since some of the people that listen here and have gotten back to me are kind of like up and coming bands, and they're trying to, decide like what to do with their band, what type of genre. What would you say is the best piece of advice that you could come up with for deciding like what type of music you want to play as a band?
Sorry. Whew. Shit, man. I don't know, just as if you all can meld it together, like take all your musical backgrounds and just like make it into one thing,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever comes out of that really is just like the most probably what you're gonna come out with really if
Yeah.
you're gonna find something.
Yeah, I think because like one thing also too kind of like go off that is also kind of like know your limits, because one of the bands that I had on here, the lead singer, I mean, they were like the deathcore band. They were just yelling and screaming and just like giving their soul basically to the microphone whenever they performed. And I asked the guy, I was like, why do you scream so much on the microphone? Like, where'd that come from? He goes, oh, well, I don't sing very good, so I just decided that yelling would work out better because it works better for my voice. So yeah, I definitely think like know your limitations. Like if you have a guy that wants to be a singer who might not be that good at singing, I mean, you're like hey, there's always death metal, there's always deathcore bands for us. I mean that we can just yell. But I mean that's a great style of music. I mean when you really think about it, I mean that style of music has so much emotion in it. Just the yelling and just the pain that you can kind of hear in their voices. It's just it is pure music when you really think about it. Because sometimes you can't understand the lyrics, but just the raw emotion that you can hear is just it's inspiring enough as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also when you guys were first starting out how do you guys record your music? Like, what is the recording process going for you guys? And when you started out, like, did you guys know how much you were going to record or what you were going to do, or how did that work out?
Well, the EP was we were just sick of not having them on discs, really. So we kind of just like threw them all together.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually went to a friend of ours. Sorry. He used to live in Duluth as well, and he recorded our EP when we were in the other band before in high school. So he moved down here, so we ended up just going and talking to him and recording with him again. Yeah, that's it. We just did a couple songs a day. It was good.
That's awesome. So when you're performing live, what goes in? Is there any like type of a specific system that goes into writing down like your set list? Is there like a certain way that like you decide what songs are going to be where in the set list? Is there like a reason behind that, or do you just kind of say like this is what we're going to play? You know, screw it. It doesn't matter really what order we play. Or is there an order into the set list that you put in?
There are 4 out of the 7 songs on the EP that we play that always go next to each other. Because they just lead in throughout the CD or through the EP or whatever. The first 2 songs, there's no space between them, so it's just basically one long song almost. So those are always next to each other, and then later in the CD the same thing happens. Otherwise, everything else we kind of just like throw around and figure it out the day of almost.
Yeah. So what would you say is the future of your band? Like, what are your upcoming shows that you guys have?
We actually have quite a few. We have 3 more with our original drummer. That'll be at Cerberus Fest this July 20th, and then we're playing at the Hook and Ladder on July 21st the next day.
Oh, okay. I'm just writing these down so that I can mention them after, and then link them on the podcast below.
Oh, okay.
Hook and Ladder. Yeah. So you guys got those shows, and are you going to be taking current are you going to audition people for the new position, or do you have a guy already like figured out?
I don't want to say anything already because we're not entirely sure.
No
but
problem.
I did have a discussion with a friend of ours. He might be either stepping in or trying out or whatever. He's a kid's amazing, so I'm super stoked for that. We do have a fill-in too until we figure something out.
Yeah, that's great. So where can people find your music? Is it on Spotify, iTunes? Where can they find it?
Basically anywhere you want. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, it's on YouTube, it's on other obscure streaming sources, Bandcamp.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I'll definitely leave a link to those things below. I mean, everyone, I'd say go check out Hurricane Show. They have experimental stuff, so I mean, if you're not a huge metalhead, I mean, it's definitely something that you want to listen to because they do take influences from different genres. And if you are a metalhead, I mean, how have you not already heard of these guys? That's just pathetic. Come on, you guys got to get your heads out of your asses and listen to these guys. So I mean, and they got some shows coming up. We'll mention the July 20th and July 21st. I'll leave a link below. So you have a Facebook page, right, that I can leave a link to?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'll leave the link to it. And I mean, if you have any other questions, I'll also put Josh's, if with Josh's permission, I'll put his Facebook page kind of like account kind of below, if that's all right with you, if they can get in contact with you and ask you any questions if they want. And,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was great having you on the show. keep me definitely posted about the locations of those shows, and I might swing by for one of them. I don't know my schedule exactly because I have been making podcasts like schedules for the next couple of weeks, so I don't know my availability. But if it does, man, I love to go out and support local artists. And do you guys have like any merch that you're selling too?
Yeah, we do. We're gonna do another run of them here quick. We just have a black and yellow, just logo shirts, but we're pushing on getting some more.
Where can people find those?
They're not online yet. Just if you want them, talk to me or come to a show, honestly.
Yep. All right. So you hear that. If you want those shirts, talk to Josh or go to one of their shows. But when you do decide to launch them online, definitely give me a link or send me an email or anything you want, and I'll definitely plug the crap out of them. I love plugging bands, and I love getting them more exposure. And most of all, I just like talking music with them, and I think it was really good. So I thank you a lot, Josh, for being on this podcast. I mean, I learned a lot. Especially the one thing that I learned most was about the paying to kind of get into concerts, kind of like that concert fee. I had no idea that ever happened. So that was some really good insight. But man, it was really great having you on the podcast. And if you need anything at all, and we'd be more than welcome to have you on the podcast another time. And if you ever need anything, just let us know. If you have any shows coming up and need a plug, let me know too. And man, it was great having you. And you just take it easy and keep plugging away.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
No problem. All right, yeah, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the Spot, signing out.